Hi everyone, this is Evan Slead from EGM Now, and I'm here to talk about an upcoming survival horror game called Evil Within 2. And I'm sure many of you have heard of this game before. It is being published by Bethesda and developed by Tango Gameworks, who made the first game. I actually was able to go to a preview event sponsored by Bethesda where I got to play several upcoming games, but Evil Within 2 is what we're going to be talking about today. So I was actually able to play a new chapter that they have not shown off yet. This is chapter 5 of the storyline, where we are, of course, following Sebastian and his search for his daughter in Union City. A lot of what we expect is going to happen, where things are going to jump out, things are going to try to kill me, and I'm going to do my best not to die. Now, I did, forewarning, cut out most of my deaths because the way that the company set up this playthrough was they had us start on the highest difficulty setting, which is called Nightmare, and we were able to lower it if it just got too intense, but my goal was to beat it completely on Nightmare, and you know what? I did it. So what you're about to see is the hardest mode during this chapter, and you'll see there are two bosses that I get to fight, starting with this first one that's about to pop up in a minute here. But before we get to that, I wanted to kind of bring up a couple points. At the actual event, we had Shinji Mikami, who is the creative director this time around, not the director for the game, and John Johannes, who is the director for the game, and we were able to talk to them about our feelings on the game and just, questions we had. And one thing that kept prevailing was we talked to them about how they were going to approach the horror with this game as opposed to the first one. And I know a lot of people with the first game felt like it was a little nonsensical, and that's to be expected for most survival horror games like Silent Hill and even some of the Resident Evil games, but I think people nowadays want something a little more grounded that can also be creepy. Something like Resident Evil 7 was a good example of that. And this is, from what I've played, especially the chapter you're about to see, does feel like that because it's a little more streamlined with what we're doing. But we have a clip here really quickly, and I want you to be able to enjoy that. So I'll pop back in once we see this lovely creature. Now, as you can see, she is just a combination of tons of body parts, and a big old chainsaw, or drill saw, I guess. So basically, the goal here was to defeat her as soon as possible to get into the Union Hall and continue moving forward in the story. Now, one thing I really loved about this fight, and like I said, you're seeing the outcome where I do manage to defeat her, but a lot of the fight is relying on the environmental hazards that you can use against her. They also can hurt you. There are tripwires and things like that I'll show you a little bit later. But the nice thing is that you obviously don't have a ton of ammo because it's a survival horror game, but you're able to use things like tripwires and even just these gates that you're seeing right here, where I'm able to kind of trap her for a brief amount of time behind them, and unload some rounds from my pistol or my shotgun onto her. But one thing I quickly learned was I definitely can't just stand there and unload. This is not as action-oriented as the first one was, or as a lot of more recent horror games have been. This is really about survival, which for me was a great experience because I grew up playing the original Resident Evil games and Silent Hill and everything, and those are completely about finding the best way to defeat an enemy without just standing there and unloading weaponry on them. So you do have a good arsenal of weapons that they've shown before, and I was able to have hands-on time with them this time, so I was able to kind of feel how they were. But I have a pistol, a shotgun, a sniper rifle, which is what I'm using right now, and then I have a bolts gun, which I'll use heavily in the second boss fight. But as you can see right here, we have a tripwire that she's about to pull, and basically that kind of freezes time, and it keeps you safe for just a little bit. And I chose to continue moving forward and just have her chase me. I mean, because the thing about it is the many times I tried to defeat her, I tried to just kind of pick a spot and just keep, you know, unloading as much ammo or damage onto her as I could, but you have to keep moving. You have to be careful about your pacing, which is a great gameplay mechanic because it keeps you on your toes without throwing unnecessary things at you, like just enemies running out of nowhere and jumping at you. You know, you have one goal, and that's just to survive. And I think that this game actually captures that pretty well from what I've played so far. That was a bolt I just used, and that actually can cause a couple different things because there's different kinds. I use the smoke one, and I'll use more in the second boss fight, like I said. But here, I wanted just to stun her for a little bit so I could kind of get my bearings and unload a couple sniper rifle rounds. But you'll see, you know, like I said, environmental hazards. There's a bunch of oil on the ground there. You know, there's a lot of boxes, there's a lot of fences to move around. That way you're able to maneuver and also keep your eye on what she's doing. And of course, just on a fun horror note, she does not stop laughing, which is super creepy. And it definitely makes it way more intimidating of a fight because you never know how she's gonna be. But right now she's kind of stuck. I think she's trying to figure out where I am, which is good because you can actually hide yourself. But eventually you do want to start doing more damage because the fight only ends once you've defeated her. And the nice thing is that gameplay actually changes a little bit later, which we'll see and talk about. But I knew right here I really wanted to get her into the oil so I could light her on fire. I was just trying to figure out what the best option was. I had tried it in a couple different attempts, and every time it just never worked out well for me. I would end up either burning myself or she would get over to me in time because from point A to point B across the oil is very, very short. So she was able to kind of just do one bounding step and just completely knock me out. But after finding some ammo here, I was able to step out and figure out a good game plan. But so there's a lot of really great touches to this time around. I don't know many of you who are watching if you played the first one. From what I understand of what Mikami and Johannes said is that, this game actually does not require a playthrough of the first game. And there she goes. She is down. But you definitely will see a lot of great Easter eggs if you did play the first game that do carry over into this one. But that's kind of great because I think the first one went under a lot of people's radars, especially since it didn't get great reviews. Understandably, it was kind of one of those, not a horrible game, but there was a lot of work that needed to be done. And it seems like they've done a lot of those fixes here. For one, there's some more bolts I'm grabbing. For one, I think they wanted to try to keep up with the modern sensibility of open world environments and just more exploration. And that was something that they really pushed home when we were playing this, was that they, the part that we're seeing now is actually a lot more linear, but they wanted to show off how you can get lost exploring and really immerse yourself in the world. But we're about to get a scene, so let's watch that really quick.
Who are you? Don't worry. O'Neill sent me. I thought I was the only one left. I'm looking for the core. Where is she? Is she here? Second floor. The stable field emitter. Emitter? Forget about that. I'm here to find the core. You must turn on the emitter. It will stabilize the environment. Without it, Union will completely turn it on. His power? You mean... Take this. Use it to turn on the emitter.
Now, a quick thing about that dialogue that got skipped. That was me, just because this was my many later attempt, so I wanted to just kind of get through it as quick as possible. But basically, we were given an emitter, and we want to go use that to get further to the core. And so I did a quick couple cuts here just so I didn't have to show you that I was looking through a lot of dark corners. But we're gonna get into this room here and get a closer look at what kind of things, art style and directing that we're seeing here. And I think it's pretty gorgeous actually, because you have a lot of low lighting. And then you have these really amazing, elaborate kind of set pieces that happen that you can investigate.
He's somewhere in here.
Like this, just this amazing kind of like this floating block with a person just in midair. Just a really cool effect, and that's something that actually carries through. You'll see it later in my second boss fight. But as I was saying before, about the exploration, this game is going to kind of go like as a funnel, is the way that they kept describing it, where you would have more linear missions that you were able to focus on getting from point A to point B to go and fight a boss or things like that. But then you also had moments of exploration that were much wider and more diverse with paths and enemies. And so the chapter that we're watching now is one of the more linear. I'm wondering if we'll ever get to see one of the more explorable paths before the game launches. But as of right now, I could see how it works, just because most survival horror games are pretty linear, but things like Silent Hill, you would go into the town and have a lot of areas to discover with brief guidance on how to get around using a map or just different points of interest. But here we have one of those kind of classic survival horror puzzles where it's not totally a puzzle. It's just kind of, I saw the painting. I'm going to put in the roses and the necklace on the mannequin to match the painting, and then just rotate her body. I didn't think this was super complicated. It seems more like just something to change up gameplay, but I was surprised that a lot of people around me were not sure how to do it, but maybe they're just not as used to survival horror. But yeah, so cameras and photography are a huge motif in this game. And, there was that huge one in the sky that we had seen screenshots of that we finally got to see in that first boss fight. And, here you're using it as a tool to complete a puzzle. So you kind of find yourself continually moving and playing off of the way the first game would use surrealism and its horror. Things kind of warp and bend, and you kind of find yourself wondering if you're in reality or you're dealing with something related to STEM. But this was a cool kind of setup because you're in this hallway,
as it gets me closer to
and obviously the point of interest is that bloody art on the wall. And then as you turn around, you realize that there's actually no open path anymore. It's closed off from you, and it's just this big open area. But here's a file that shows a little bit more about the situation, just to add a little more context. It's about a murder in a park. And I actually love this kind of stuff, just because, especially for a horror game, you want to have, lore that maybe doesn't always connect completely, where you're able just to kind of build an atmosphere that, danger and evil have lurked in the area. So it's cool to see these kinds of things implemented this time around. But
still a cold case.
One thing I want to talk about too while we're in here, because we're in this room for a while, just you kind of have to go from painting to painting to figure out your next move.
It's ticking.
But one thing that they carried over, but it seems like they've refined this time around, was the weapon customization options. That was something I got to do right when I turned on the demo. I did not show it just because it was a pretty long process that, would have been a lot of explaining just to show you how the menu works and everything. But basically, you're able to upgrade your weapons. Previously, you had to go back to the hospital in the first game just to do those kinds of things. But now it seems like there's going to be a lot more areas where you're able to customize and build up your weapons. I wanted to kind of give myself a challenge, so I mostly upgraded my handgun, just because that tends to be my last option, because you do get a lot of ammo for it, but I try to save things like my shotgun or my sniper for those bigger encounters like the first boss we watched. And but you're able to upgrade reload speed and recoil and damage output, things like that. And then of course you can find gunpowder and weapon parts, and you're able to make ammo, and of course, other consumable weapons. So it's nice and varied. I think being able to craft and build up that is a lot better now. Just even from the brief amount of time I saw, it was just really monotonous to have to go back and forth in the first game. And it's nice to know that you can have a couple different times throughout the game. I mean, I don't know how that will play out once the full game launches. I'm really curious to see, especially with how there's going to be a little bit more of an exploration attached to the game, if that's going to kind of mess up finding those areas. But I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting concept, and I'm just glad that there's something to change up gameplay this time. Now, definitely am hoping that the puzzles are a little bit more involved. It's cool,
This guy's playing with me.
you know, seeing these kinds of things and, like I said, building atmosphere, but there's definitely something missing. I definitely want to feel like I'm accomplishing a puzzle or I'm overcoming something, and not just, you know, picking up an item and putting it right next to where it needs to be. You know, that's kind of a sin of a lot of more recent horror games, where they'll give you a puzzle piece that is literally next to the puzzle itself, so you don't really feel like you've actually accomplished anything. It's just kind of, you know, it's like those kids games where you put little like toys through certain shapes. It just kind of feels like that. So, you know, like I said, that mannequin one was interesting, but definitely not a puzzle that felt involved. So I'm hoping that they put a little more effort into that. But what is working is this environment that they're building. It definitely feels unsettling, and playing it, I was very immersed. I was able to kind of block out everything else that was going on and just enjoy my playthrough, which I think is huge, because the first game definitely was you know, obviously it's a serious horror game, so you're not going to expect fun and rainbows and everything, but there was something about it that just felt so dark and depressing because of some of the twists that happened, that it was hard to just want to immerse myself in it. But this time around, I definitely was excited, and even though I definitely died a lot on the 2 boss fights, I definitely didn't want to give up, because I was really curious to see what would happen next. And it's nice to see that they're trying to make the storyline a little more straightforward. So we have another file right here. It's just a photo. And, you know, Sebastian is, you know, tying everything together. And you're just kind of finding yourself moving farther and farther into what's going on. So here was a kind of a weird, classic sort of jump scare turned into a strange environment. So I'll just let you enjoy that really quick. So you find yourself, again, the photography thing is huge. I mean, this is like a photo shoot area with all these creatures that are frozen in time. I mean, that's, you know, frozen in time, that's a big thing too. This guy, that little dude that was standing in front of the door, is just very helpfully pointing the way out. But you'll find you're actually back where you started, with that hallway and the mannequin that you put together and took the photo of. But it's interesting to see how much they're going to carry this motif through, because we're actually about to meet up with one of the game's main antagonists before our final boss fight. But you know, of course, I'll let you watch that entire clip. But it's really interesting already seeing, and this is, like I said, chapter 5, so we're pretty into the story. It's interesting to see that it's still pretty straightforward, and
This has to be
they're focusing the weirdness on the external and not on the storyline itself, which I think is a good thing. So here Sebastian is going to use that transmitter, the emitter that was given to him.
This communicator.
And so let's just see what happens.
You've been searching for me for so long. so I have come. But wait, it's not me you seek, is it? No, it's the girl. I should be offended. But how can I be? You're not the only person who wants her power. There is another, one far more deserving. One who can offer rewards you could never imagine. So sorry, but you've been outbid. Fear radiates from you. It's beautiful, but not yet finished. I am Stefano, and now you are my art. Meet my beautiful Obscura.
Restart sequence.
You gotta be kidding me.
Sequence will complete in 90 seconds.
That thing is stopping.
Right, so we have another time stop kind of situation. So this is the second boss, and this is the final part of the video. But so something kind of different about this fight compared to the first one is that, you know, like I said, that first fight was all about you had to defeat that enemy. This time around, we want to get that transmitter working, and the only way to do that is to essentially stun or keep this enemy busy, basically. That's something that I kind of learned as I played through it several times, because you want to keep it busy to stop it from stopping the transmitter. And you see up at the top we have that timer that starts at 90 seconds, and you want to get it down to 0 by the end of the fight. And the only way to do that is to keep it from stopping time. So the way you can do that is, of course, through damage. Now, the better thing to do, as I learned, and you'll see me doing here, is the bolt gun is fantastic for that, because usually they have ammo that can do lasting damage, or prolonged damage, I guess I should say, where instead of a handgun where you can just do like a little damage at a time, it would stop her for a little bit, and then she would run back over to the middle and get it all figured out. But as you can also see, this is an enemy that definitely learns from your attack, so she was able to dodge. Now here is my wheel of weapons and healing items, and so I'm going to the bolt gun, and I'm actually changing the ammo type. I have spark bolts here that are able to do damage either directly to her like that, or I can also hit a wall and still have it damage her because of the lasting effect it has. So yeah, she's actually learned to dodge some of my attacks, so you have to be pretty careful about not just, yeah, see, like that. But the spark bolt actually hit her still, so that was good. I knew I did enough damage to get her close to a place where she would need to stop and kind of lick her wounds, but I wanted to get at least one more solid hit on her before I tried to do anything drastic. There was a couple times where I tried to use a lot of melee attacks after I would stun her, and that worked sort of okay, but she's so fast the longer the fight goes on that if you get too close, even for a little bit, it ends up really firing back at you. So like I said, the bolt gun I've learned for when this game comes out, definitely use that, because it is one of the better weapons to keep her grounded. But I did shoot off a couple handgun rounds here to get that started. So now you can see the timer's back on and the timer is going down. And I decided to go back to my bolt gun and just kind of take the battle back into my favor. So now she's actually really occupied with me, which is great, because the longer that she's worried about you, the better.
50 seconds.
And see, I got a good hit of a smoke bolt on her right there. That's a time where I would normally run up and melee her, but I just was way more concerned on keeping her busy than I was on putting a lot of damage out on her. And as you can see here, she'll go back over and try to stop it again. And she did manage to do that, but I did get one other extra hit on her. So yeah, this is it's an interesting kind of concept of not exactly trying to defeat something, but just keeping it busy enough. So you know, I'm obviously, like I said, I'm successful here, so it maybe doesn't look too difficult, but there is a balance that you have to figure out of unloading a certain amount of damage, but then also realizing that you're not going to hit her every single time. So it's really about conservation. Again, the survival aspect here is very strong. It's not about just unloading damage on something. But one really great trick I ended up having was right here. I was able to consistently keep her busy because of my electric bolts, which seems to shock her every couple seconds. So I was able to finally get the timer down to where it was supposed to be. So yeah, that was it. I defeated her and I got the timer down to 0. So that's gonna be the end of the video. I was able to play some other games, but this video is all about The Evil Within 2, which arrives on, fittingly, October 13th, and it will be available for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. And for everything else, return to EGM Now for all things Evil Within 2.